Hi, BookTube. Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and I'm going to do I feel like I can't really say a review because I just want to talk about it, really, and just chat about this. Um, I actually started this in 2020, and like most books that are really dense, I didn't finish it until a year later. Although this is a step up because there have been books that I have taken years, plural, to finish, to come back to. So this was only 1 year before I came back to it. So I'm unfortunately, I feel like I can't really talk about the meter of this because I don't really know a lot about that. I know that the meter of the original text. The original poem is very unique and is hard to recapture for translators. And I also this edition of it is not written like a poem. It actually looks like prose, which made it a lot easier for me to get into because I'm still kind of learning to get into epic poetry. And it doesn't help that I'm trying to do it on my own rather than, trying to do it via, like, someone else helping me. Like, I read Sir Gawain the Green Knight and Beowulf in a class, in that British literature class I took. I'm kind of, I was trying to read Paradise Lost and Dante's Inferno by myself. Although what really helped me with Dante's Inferno, because the first few parts of Inferno, it was easier for me to understand because I think watching Jennifer Brooks's videos talking about Dante's Inferno and going over it, her discussing it really helped me with that one. But like I said, this is written like, it looks like a regular novel. But it does have a bit of a poetic feel to it. And it also, reminds me of like a really long fairy tale. With it, because obviously it's pretty dense. And so now, I do think you probably, for the sake of context, you probably want to read the Iliad first. For some reason, when I first got this from the library, not this copy obviously, I originally brought it from the library, I was thinking, for some reason I was thinking the Odyssey was first, or that I wanted to read that one first. But you should probably read the Iliad first because there's a lot of references to the Iliad in this poem. But what you can do is, if you don't have access to the Iliad, but you have the Odyssey and you want to read that, maybe watch the movie Troy. Start with Orlando Bloom, Eric Bana, Brad Pitt. That's basically the Iliad, except for in a more, done in a more cinematic way. In a way that's more appealing. Although I think the poem is obviously appealing. The Iliad is obviously appealing to today's audience. But, it's done in the cinematic universe takes these things that, if not everybody reads ancient literature, then it can tell the story in a way that's for the layman's person to get into and to appreciate. And then maybe one day you'll read the Iliad. So, in case you don't know, the Iliad is basically about the war between the Greeks and the Trojans. The Greeks and the Trojans were trying to form a friendship, an alliance, I believe, and then Paris apparently falls in love with Menelaus' wife, who's supposed to be really beautiful, and he can't keep it in his pants, and decides to kidnap her. Now, I don't know if she went willingly. I mean, I imagine she would, because, if he looks like Orlando Bloom, then yeah, I'd go with him. And so that pisses off Menelaus, which I don't blame him. I generally do not blame him for getting mad. I mean, this is his wife, and this guy stole her. She's cheating on the guy. And then, but I am convinced that Agamemnon, his brother, just used that as an excuse. And that's basically what happened. He talks his brother into going after and starting a war. So basically everyone else gets in the, in the backlash of Prince Paris being a dumbass and taking someone else's wife because he can't control himself. And there's the whole, Trojan horse. Achilles is in the war. He gets, and if you know your history, if you know about, you know your history, you know all that kind of stuff, then you know what happens to Achilles. And so Odysseus is in that war, and that war went on for like 10 years, all because someone stole someone else's wife. It's like, you're basically blaming everybody, you're punishing everybody else for your dumb decisions. And and of course, this is a time when we didn't have trains or automobiles and more planes, so he has to sail. And it's all about his journey. The Odyssey is all about just his journey back and how his wife and son, who he didn't get to watch grow up, deal with this. And, they're wondering if he's ever going to come back. And what makes things worse is that Penelope, his wife, has a bunch of guys, like hundreds of men, who think that, oh, your husband's dead, so we're going to go and we want to marry you now. We want to take your husband's kingdom and marry you. And they, which I think is ridiculous. I don't understand that, but okay. So everyone knows the whole, the whole thing with he was trapped on Calypso's island or her kingdom or whatever, and there's the whole Circe, which Madeline Miller draws attention to with her book Circe, which is the origin story, and we actually get a backstory for that character, and we get, she actually has a sympathetic backstory, and you actually kind of feel bad for her and see things from her perspective, which I like that a lot of female authors are doing that. They're taking the female characters from the Odyssey and from the Iliad and giving them a story, giving them depth. Because the women of the story, not seen in a favored light. I mean, they're either the men are suspicious of them, don't trust them, and blame them for everything that's happened, or they're kind of naive and, and just, they're someone's wife, and they have to wait for, and now Penelope, I think, is pretty clever in this. I mean, she's one of the female characters that's actually, she's, you feel bad for her, but she's clever, and she's still a good person. She's not seen as someone you can't trust, although although it depends on whose perspective. And I appreciate that these authors are highlighting these women, these female characters, and giving them a story. I'm curious what someone would do with Helen of Troy, if they did a story about Helen, because you got plenty of stories about Penelope, you got Bryce's perspective in one. Although I think one that came out a few years ago, or came out not that long ago, I think looks at all the women's perspectives from the Iliad. So I'm sure that Helen of Troy's perspective is in there. So I'm curious what her story would be if they did a separate story. But anyway, so this is a very, it's actually really, despite the way they treat female characters in this, it's actually kind of fun. It was a very funny story. And it's an adventure story, and oh my god, Odysseus, they keep calling him noble. It's some of the things he does to me aren't very noble. I mean, he's a good guy and he cares about his family and his crewmates, his friends, but he kind of, and he does warn them when there's danger and tries to protect them the best way he can, but sometimes he's kind of dumb, and there with the Cyclops, for instance, he essentially, this is going to be spoilerly, like I said, that's the only reason why I'm just kind of making this more of a discussion, because I feel like I want to say so much about this, but it would involve spoiling at things. But anyway, so he's on the island. He is on the island with the Cyclops. He and his men captured, and of course the Cyclops is this big giant dude with one eye, a giant monster with one eye. He basically kills a lot of his men, smashing them together like pancakes. And so Odysseus, which knows, of course he tricks someone. I would too if I thought I could be clever enough. He kind of taunts him and calls him, says his name is Nobody, and then somehow he's able to trick the Cyclops and burn his eye, make him blind, and he ends up escaping with the men that he has remaining, and then the Cyclops is bumbling through the forest of his little island, and his friends and all the other islanders like, what happened? Who did this to you? And he's like, nobody did this to me, nobody. And of course they assume that he literally means nobody, not someone named Nobody, but he means literally nobody did this to him. He just did this to himself, apparently. And so he comes running out, catches up to Odysseus, is sailing away, and dumbass Odysseus is like, ha 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 ha, na 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 na. Guess what? You can tell everybody that Odysseus kicked your ass. And it's like, seriously? I mean, now granted, there's one way he could know who his daddy is, but the Cyclops' dad is Poseidon, and Poseidon decides to make things really difficult the rest of Odysseus' journey, and it's hilarious because it's like, who, you idiot, he's a little shit. Odysseus just a little shit. And he's also a bit of a man whore because he was on Circe's island for a year as her lover, and I think he ends up, if I remember correctly, having, Calypso wants him to stay on her island as her husband, I think, and and it's been a while since I read that part, but I think they have sex too. And then, let's see, and then meanwhile, what's going on with Penelope is that, like I said, she has these hundreds of guys who are like, oh, your husband's probably dead, so let's get married, and you will pick one of us to get married. So she does the only thing she can think of. She's like, okay, I'm making this special shrine for my father-in-law, and you have to give me until I finish it. And then basically she pretends she ruins it every night and then has to redo it again the next day, and that's her way of procrastinating and delaying. Because, of course, these men won't leave her alone. They're tearing her house and home apart, eating her food and stuff, and her brother and father are encouraging her to choose a guy, choose one of them to be your husband. And meanwhile, she is grieving because she hasn't seen her husband in years, literally in years. And then her son has decided to go and leave to find out what happened to his father, which is understandable, but he's also gone too, which this is his house. If he is the heir of this household, and the Sooners decide to plan to murder him if he comes back. Because they automatically assume, even though this one is grieving loss of the love of her life, they all assume that she's going to choose one of them if they prove themselves worthy. And I find it fascinating, like really interesting that how they looked at, like, how marriage, it was all about who was the best warrior and, who was the most badass, and that's who you would choose to marry in a lot of these stories. And it's like, that's how you choose your husband? Really? Because I don't understand that. And they're all just arrogant pricks who just, it's like, I don't understand this. It's like, this woman has lost her husband, and you just are like, you don't understand the grieving process. You must not understand the grieving, which I know this is a different time, but it doesn't mean I'm not gonna, as a modern woman, a modern 21st century woman, I'm not gonna, find some of this really bizarre and weird, and just, I don't understand that. I'm just admitting that I don't understand it, and I find it weird. I am so glad that I am a woman at this time period, so if I do fall in love and get married and everything, I won't have to worry about these kinds of situations. And then, of course, we get the Circe part, which, I think is really interesting. Finally read that story, that part of the story, because I read Madeline Miller's novel, And I kind of knew a little bit about what happens. Like, I knew that she turns some of his crew into pigs and all that. Which, that part was so creepy. I mean, I hope he so deserved to see that part on screen, if I saw a movie adaptation, because just, like, she talks at he says they all got all these pig parts, and she gives them essentially a drug or a potion that makes them forget everything and what they left behind. She drugs them up, and then, which on the start, and turns them into pigs, and it's kind of creepy and gross, well, more creepy than gross, but just seeing, if I saw that transformation, it would give me the EBGBs. And like I said, Madeline Miller takes that part of the story and adds more to it. We get more depth. We learn her backstory, and which I don't know if there's any material on her, because I don't remember reading anything that explained her backstory or not. But maybe there is. Maybe there is something in here that, or maybe there's another source of information on Cersei. I keep saying it wrong. I think I'm saying it wrong. And then, okay, I'm gonna give this hand a break. So, let's see. Oh, this is awkward. So I'm just gonna hold it. Just put it on my lap for now. We also, and another thing that I was reading reviews after I finished the book after I finished this on the Odyssey, and someone pointed out an interesting review on the review where they talked about how Odysseus, they bring attention to how he's telling these stories to other people, like all the parts with talking about Cersei and all that, Cersei, and I think also the Cyclops and everything. He's telling this to a group of people, the Phoenicians, I think, and so it's kind of interesting that he's telling the story. He's quite the storyteller. So it's almost like you gotta wonder, some of this might have been, granted, some of this probably did happen, but you gotta wonder if maybe it's a little bit exaggerated. Like, you can't take his word for it. And so he's kind of a little bit of an unreliable narrator in certain parts, like the Cyclops and Cersei, because he's telling the story. It's all about telling stories. This whole poem, and it also highlights grief and how you're dealing with, because these men were in the middle of a war that lasted for 10 years, and you have people that they left behind having to deal with that and the loss, and not knowing if their husband is alive and if he's going to come home. And sometimes, I just thought about something earlier today, how I wonder if maybe some of Odysseus' journey, that, granted, yes, he was traveling by sea, and he couldn't go really fast, and there was a lot of monsters he was facing, and a lot of his men were going to die, and but sometimes I wonder if maybe he almost didn't want to come home, because then he would have to face what happened and see his grieving wife, and deal with the situation, so this adventure, he was not it was a way for him to avoid everything, to avoid it, and to not deal with his feelings. He could focus on fighting the monsters and trying to get back, which would take a long time, and maybe in a way it was his way to escape his grief, and to escape, the burden he carries from this experience, because this is something he knows, fighting and being a warrior, which someone else said, I cannot remember her name, but there's a channel where I watched her reviewing the Odyssey, and it was one of the newer translations. I want to say her name was Elizabeth Wilson, the translator, and she was saying how I lost my train of thought. Sorry, I got sidetracked earlier. How Odysseus is very... I knew I was going to say something really great, but I forgot what I was going to, or bring up something really great that she said, but now I don't remember what it was. But that's my theory, that maybe, even though, yeah, obviously, it was going to take a long time, and he can't control the gods or these monsters that he's going to face, because he faces quite a bit of them and loses all his men. But I mean, even when he finally does get home, which I think kind of dragged out a little bit too much, like, it took him forever to finally, reveal himself to his family. Well, not so much his son, but to his wife, who was in pain and probably depressed and heartbroken because she thinks her husband is dead. I mean, in fact, when she's finally told he's alive, she doesn't believe it. So she's so heartbroken. I mean, in fact, she doesn't, when she sees her husband because he's in a disguise, she doesn't believe it's him. And he doesn't go straight to her. He's so bloodthirsty for revenge. And it's just, I remember when I was reading that, I was like so frustrated. It's like, dude, your wife is heartbroken and thinks you're dead, and all you're worried about is getting her revenge. I mean, can't you just give her a little bit of a sign? But, I mean, I don't know, maybe he was worried she'd talk him out of his revenge, or prevent him from getting his revenge and getting back at those men, which I don't blame him. I would want to kick their asses too, but it's just, it was also very frustrating because I knew that Penelope is heartbroken, thinks he's dead, so it's like, I wanted him to tell her. But anyway, so I had a really, great time with this. I'm so glad I read it, and, and I appreciate that it was written, like, in prose instead of just, instead of the poem format, because, I don't know, I'm still working on it, but I wanted to enjoy this, and it read like a great story, an epic story. Here's the translator. And I really like these cloth-bound editions, although it's so hard for me to find these, to get these, because as soon as I finally decide to buy something on Thrift Books, these ones are the Penguin English Library edition. Someone's already bought them. They're all gone. It's like, are you kidding me? Why can't you let me have a chance at them? And I can't buy books right away. I'm not going to buy books right away. I'm not going to jump every week buy a book. But that's what you gotta do, almost. Although I was able to get one of Jane Austen's novels in the cloth-bound edition, so I finally got another cloth-bound. But I really love these covers. I'm not a big hardback. I'm starting to get away from hardbacks. But these designs, and there's no dust jacket, which I'm starting to realize how annoying that is. I like the design and everything. But anyway, this is really good, and like I said, I think you should probably, for the sake of context, probably read the Iliad. Either read the Iliad, or maybe look it up on SparkNotes, or like I said, you could watch the movie Troy, which is basically the Iliad, but done in a more cinematic way, or in a way that's more universally appealing to people, because not everybody can get into epic poetry. I mean, I'm sorry to say, but not everybody loves it, which is it's a challenge. But this was really fun and it was really good. I enjoyed it. I had a good time with reading this and experiencing the story, and I definitely want to introduce this to my nephews and my niece one day when they're old enough. They're still kind of young. One of the oldest is 5, but one day I can read it to them. One day I'll have to read it to them next time they come. Although they could have, I know that my sister got them an audiobook thing for kids, a Yoto player, and so that one has a lot of the kids classics and a lot of more modern contemporary books that I feel like are classics now, on there for them to listen to, because for now, until they can read a book like this on their own, it's a good place to start. But yeah, I think this is also a good place for them to start with this, because of the way it's written, the way it's translated, like it looks like a novel. It will probably help them if they read it for the first time. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the Odyssey. Sorry, it's a little bit scattered and not very polished in clean, but it's my, I just wanted to get this, I just wanted to do this. I wanted to chat with you guys about the Odyssey, because I really had a good time, and I had quite a bit to say on it, I feel like, in which sometimes classics I don't always have a lot to say. And sometimes even fantasy I struggle with sometimes because, their plots can be so complicated. Easier to read than something like this, but still. But anyway, so I hope you liked this video. And if you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, click subscribe, click the bell notification below if you want to see me post more, if you want to be notified when I post new videos. And I hope you are enjoying your reading, and I will talk to you all later. Alright, bye!